Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It's Hayden here with a Blitz deck tick today for a deck that I guess I'm calling it a Dash Plasma Barrel Shot deck. Skirmish season is fully underway. It's Blitz season. I've played 2 weeks of skirmishes now. I've been lucky enough to play 3 skirmishes. That's it for me for the season. I'm going to be taking the final 2 weeks off from skirmish. And so far I've played 3 different decks in this format. And I put a question out to Twitter, put a poll out just a few hours before I decided to record this and said, if I recorded a deck tech, which of the 3 decks would you like to see? And the overwhelming winner was this Dash deck that I played actually this past weekend, yesterday in fact, to a top 8 finish in a skirmish event. I had so much fun playing this deck. I wish I actually had another skirmish event so I could go and run this deck back. I'd probably make a couple of tweaks, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the video. But at first, what I wanted to do is just kind of break down what this deck is, what the core ethos of what it's trying to do is, and then I'm going to get into some of the really explosive turns that you can do with this deck, because basically every game I was playing in this skirmish event, I was presenting 27 damage on at least one turn of the game. And then on some other turns, I was even presenting 20 plus damage. So I think this deck is really ends up being quite strong. I think there's a few like tweaks and tunes. It was kind of thrown together the night before. And I had a few ideas of how I wanted this to go. And you'll see that with some of the cards that we talk through. But the general idea with this kind of, I guess this Plasma Barrel deck is to find a really big turn and take advantage of this item right here, Ticklo Pounder. You effectively get to start with 6 damage on the board, and yes, that's going to be split across 3 turns, but that can really power through some big turns. So you want to make make hay while the sun's shining with those first 3 turns on your Ticklo Pounder turn. Use some once sort of one and done equipment in the form of Goliath Gauntlet and Hardened Cross Strap. I'll talk a bit more about those when we get into the equipment, but they're super crucial for this deck. And then you've got this Plasma Barrel Shot, which is, sometimes it looks like you've got to put work in to get a romping club out of it, but it's really strong. And you can play it on the end of a chain, and it's an extra threat. And, it's not uncommon to get this to, 4-5 on a lot of turns, and on your big turn especially. And then that's when a card like Achilles Accelerator comes in to maybe pop that at instant speed, and then chuck something else on the end of the chain, like, an Overblast or a Maximum Velocity. So this deck felt really powerful. I feel like there's a lot of things going on here. I'm actually going to start by talking about some of the matchups, what I think with this Dash deck, just to start with. I think if you were walking into a meta where you expect a lot of Oldtime, I probably wouldn't pick this deck up, to be honest. I think Oldtime is your worst matchup, your toughest matchup, and the one I definitely wanted to avoid yesterday. Unfortunately, I could not avoid it, and it was a really tough game. I played into like a more sort of controlling Oldtime. I'd actually played a game earlier, the day before, in some sort of testing games, and found these more like tempo-based Ultims with E-Strikes and what we're seeing with pummels and stuff, a bit easier to deal with because you do have these explosive turns and the defensive capabilities isn't quite as good. They can't claw back life with sigils, etc. These more defensive Ultim decks can definitely be tough. But saying that, if you're expecting to see, a lot of Kasai, I think Kasai is a great matchup. A lot of Viserai, I think Viserai is a perfectly reasonable matchup. Rhinar is big now in the format. How do we play into Rhinar? Well, we just pick up a deck that has, a really explosive sort of engine behind it and go with that. So those are the matchups, I think. Now, I want to get in, break this deck down, and talk about some of the card choices that I made for this list for the weekend of Skirmish. All right, let's hop straight into it and break down the deck. So within this Dash deck, we're playing 19 reds, we're playing 13 yellows, 13 blues, and then 8 yellows, of course, to make up our total deck. Now, while in reality we are playing 13 blues, one of these is going to start on the battlefield every single time, whether that be a Ticklo Pounder or even a Ticklo Core. I don't actually think there's any matchups where you do want to start with this Ticklo Core, because those resources immediately start coming off. And generally what you want to do on the first turn of your game is set up, get a counter on this Plasma Barrel Shot, get a really key card like a Overblast or a Maximum Velocity, a 0-cost boost attack into your arsenal, even a 2-cost boost attack potentially into your arsenal. So in general, I think you want to start with the Ticklo Pounder, and then you're looking for the 3 best turns you can find. So often turn 1 is all about setup. In terms of the actual cards in here, so start with the blues on the right-hand side here. So we've got the 2 Ticklo Cores and the 1 Ticklo Pounder. The reason I chose to go with 1 Ticklo Pounder is I don't actually think you have time to get a second Ticklo Pounder online. Maybe there's an argument if you are trying to tweak this to go into an all-time meta, then you probably want that second Ticklo Pounder. But I think the matchup is so tough that probably I would just pick something like a Viserai or Rhinar if I'm heading into an Ultim sort of field with more defensive Ultims. But in saying that, if you really want to play Dash, I would probably pick up a second Ticklo Pounder. The Ticklo Cores are really, really crucial. These are the things that are going to allow you to have these explosive turns, these really big turns, easily get off the maximum velocities, Overblasts, and these 2-cost attacks, which we'll talk about soon. And there's actually a really cool interaction, which I'll talk about when I go through some of the lines of this deck and some of the sort of turns I was playing out with this deck, just so you can try and recreate those and look out for these sort of plays if you do want to pick up this deck. Other blues over here, we've got just kind of all just standard good boost cards. As many zero costs as we can. Zero costs are important to this because of maximum velocity and the Pleasant Barrel Shot. And then we've got High Spin Impact, Zipper Hit, and Throttle. Just, I think, the best boost cards available to us from a damage output perspective at the blue sort of slot that we have available. Yellows, Spark of Genius. Spark of Genius is here to find Ticklo Core, be a yellow that defends for 3. But the power of this card actually surprised me a lot. Originally, I thought maybe I only want to play one Spark of Genius, or I want to have another sort of item to go and find with this, like either a second Ticklo Pounder, or maybe the red one from Arcane Rising, which I should definitely know the name of, which gives you the 2 resources at the start of the turn. I'm going to find that card before we drop to the next part of the video. And then what ends up happening is that you just have these really cool lines with Ticklo Core, and often Spark of Genius is just always good enough to go and get a Ticklo Core, use the Achilles Accelerator, draw a card, and continue on with your turn, and it gets you a lot of value. So really like this card. And then just, yeah, the zero cost again. We've got the T-Bones back again. We've got the 0 to 60s, and then Zipper Hit, just the best yellow attack actions that we have that say boost on them, available to us. And then our reds. So on the right-hand side here, we've just got our good old-fashioned boost cards, the ones that just our bread and butter of this deck, going to push through damage and just be the work, sort of the engine of the deck. Throttles, Overloops, Zipper Hits, High Spin Impacts, T-Bones, and 0 to 60s. We play 2 copies of each of those. And then over here on the left, we've got sort of our, I don't know, like our garnishing, our spices, and our end result. So Rotary Ram, I think Rotary Ram is just a good card to be playing right now. Because you are boosting through and using your deck as a resource, this is a card that can go to the bottom of the deck, and you can get back. It's not quite as effective as I thought it would be, and this may be as a cut for potential more red boost cards. But I think it's good enough that you want to play it, and there's some lines where it's good. And also, it sort of causes breakpoints on some cards, which is not irrelevant, plus it's 0 cost. And increasing the cost of this deck by putting in maybe more boost cards like Pedal to the Middle that cost 2, I think that's a bit of a risk. So I would probably stay with the Rotary Ram, which is damage for 0. Combustible Courier, just a must block threat for the opponent. Otherwise, it's representing 2 for 7 damage, which is huge, with the Go Again, of course, with boost. And then our kind of finishes, our 1 Overblast and the 2 Maximum Velocity. You could argue to play the 2 Overblast, because, you know, the real power of this effect is, you know, play a couple of 0 cost boost cards, maybe a Zipper Hit off a blue, and then you play this Overblast, and it's coming in for 8 or 9, which is fantastic, but you only have one Achilles Accelerator, and you're often wanting to pop the Accelerator to Overblast plus Pleasant Barrel Shot, and I think having more cards that don't boost can be a bit of a liability, especially when you've got decks like Rhinar running around, things like that, where, you know, you don't necessarily want to be having these cards that could get clogged up in your hand, even to Kasai, where, you know, you don't want to be blocking with your attack actions. So if you're stuck with multiple of these attack actions that don't boost, that can be really tough. So that's why I went with 1 Overboost. I think Overblast, and I'd probably stay there, to be honest. And then the 2 Maximum Velocities. It is so easy to get these Maximum Velocities off in this deck, as long as you set it up correctly. Really cherish these 0 cost cards, but the addition of T-Bone in this new format with Everfest makes it so much easier to max velocity people. And this is how you have some really, really big and crazy turns. It's not the only way. Overblasts and Pleasant Barrel Shots and 2 cost attacks plus some 0 cost attacks is also really, really strong. But the Maximum Velocity, and that's why we've got the Hardened Cross Trap in there to really push those turns forward. All right, next up, we've got to talk about equipment, and I'm going to draw your eye to the side, right-hand side here, or right-hand side of my screen, and that's, to be honest, the main part of this equipment suite. So, Pleasant Barrel Shot, of course, this is kind of, look, honestly, it's probably my favorite weapon in this game. I don't think it's the best weapon. I don't think it's the weapon I necessarily enjoy playing the most, but I think the weapon is really, really cool. You know, it does a really cool effect, has this interesting sort of design space with it on the combat chain and how it reacts to boost. Also, it just looks awesome in cold foil. So I really wanted to play this card. I'll be honest, one of the main reasons I wanted to play Dash, and then I was just surprised about how good this deck actually is once it was sort of in practice. So Pleasant Barrel Shot is kind of the cornerstone of the deck. We're looking to get a charge counter on that on turn 1. Sometimes we're only using it once in a game, but in longer games, you know, we are trying to utilize it, and especially into like Ultims or Bravos. We're trying to utilize that rather than running out of threats necessarily, because we probably need to have 3 really strong turns to get through, and Pleasant Barrel Shot's going to help us do that. Only weapon we play. The kind of linchpins of the equipment suite, Goliath Gauntlet and Hardened Cross Trap. These 2 have impressed me so much this Blitz format, in terms of what they do to make up for, you know, everyone's got the fridges, right? All these cards that defend well. Don't worry about that. We've got cards that enable big turns. Hardened Cross Trap and Goliath Gauntlet. Goliath Gauntlet is just pure damage, and in a 2 or 3 turn format, that's really strong in my opinion. And then you've got this Hardened Cross Trap as well, which just cheats a card into play for us. Allows us to pay for these 2 cost attacks we have, or pay for this Maximum Velocity. Pay for Throttle first attack on the chain, or pay for a Maximum Velocity at the end of a chain, because we can break the chain before we play the Maximum Velocity. So this card, really important, really enables us to have these big explosive turns, get those extra resources, and almost cheat these cards out. And then the other two we kind of standard play is the Achilles Accelerator and Arcanite Skullcap. Skullcap just gives us some defensive capability. And to be honest, I don't think that there's a better hit to play. You could play Hope Merchant's Hood. Actually, in all honesty, I think that's probably reasonable. And the Visiatronic, although it does let you sort of draw and replace those cards with boost, I don't think that effect is good enough to give up on the defensive value. I'd probably almost rather the Hope Merchant's Hood because I'm looking for a big turn. Maybe I go digging for a max velocity or an overblast, for instance, on a key turn. Achilles Accelerator, though, is really important, and it's all about timing when you use this effect. One of the best ways to use it is in conjunction with a Spark of Genius. So you come in with your first attack boost, and then you play the Spark of Genius. Go and find this Teklo Core, which is going to set you up for your two next turns. Lines nicely up with your Teklo sort of pounder, ideally. So turn 1 sort of, or turn 2 Spark of Genius. Lines up well. Draw the card. Pop the Achilles Accelerator. You've replaced the Spark of Genius. You've got a Teklo Core in to play for free, effectively, at the expense of your Accelerator. And you just keep going with your turn. Still produce a lot of damage. And you've got these resources for later turns, the next 2 turns down the track, which Teklo Core provides you. And actually, again, like the Hardened Cross Trap, enables us to just get these big turns away by paying for these 2-cost attacks. So while I'm playing these 4 sort of pieces of equipment in 90% of matches, 80% of matches maybe, we do also have some other options in here. We do have the Nullring Gloves, which I'm playing into Viscerai, and then the Visiatronic plus the Nullring Gloves with the Achilles Accelerator for the Kano and Icelander matchups. We have the Tickler Foundry Heart. Now, I think this is an option to bring in more equipment for the defensive value over the Hardened Cross Trap. I actually just don't think it's good enough in basically any matchup. I think the Hardened Cross Trap is just too important. The only one is maybe Ice Lexi, where you know they're ice, so the Hardened Cross Trap can be a bit of a liability with Frostbites and with Channel Lake Frigid, and that defensive ability might be really relevant for just trying to like turn a corner in a game and set up that big turn that you need to stop an arrow on hit. Ironhide Gauntlet, same kind of theory. I never played the Ironhide, and I never played the Ironhide Legs. I had extra slots and couldn't really decide what I wanted. These could probably be other things. Like I said, maybe there's a Hope Merchants. Maybe you play some, I don't know, an Iron Rock Gauntlet. I'm not really too sure, but these 2 cards I think are flex slots. And then the Gambler's Gloves, which is just purely for KO. So that's our equipment's sort of loadout, equipment slots, and why we're using them and how we're using them in this Dash Plasma Barrel deck. Now, I did say earlier in the video that I thought there was a few cards that you could look at potentially changing, and I might look at changing if I was going to run this Dash deck back again. If I had another event to go to, maybe I'll have to find some armories to pick up and play some Blitz. But if I were to make some changes, so some of the things that I would consider, we already talked about this, but the Ironhide, I think they're not doing a lot in this build, and they're definitely candidates for the chopping block and how you want to look at that. I'm not 100% certain what I would play. Maybe Vest of the First Fist is good in certain matchups and better than Hardened Cross Trap. I'm not too sure. Potentially there's another hit piece you could play there. So I think these are on the chopping block, and you can look at options there. Tickler Pounder. If you did want to play a Tickler Pounder for maybe a heavy control meta, or you feel like you need it, I'm not certain that I want this card yet. It doesn't defend. So while it feels like it's just a blue, you can always pitch it. It's a mech card. It's fine. The fact it doesn't defend is not nothing, especially when you're trying to maybe defend out on a turn and come in with something like a 0 to 60. If this is the last card that you get to keep, it's pretty unexciting. So I'm not sure I would, but if you feel like you do, I would probably cut something like a high speed impact. I don't think I want to go up on the blue count. The blue count felt really nice at 12. It says 13, but 12, of course, because we start with 1 Tickler Pounder in play, and then our blues in the form of the Tickler Cores that come out. Blues, but also once they hit the board, they add us those resources. Rotary Ram, as I said, I'm not sure about this card. I like it because it doesn't cost. It's 0, so while it's not a boost card that's for the chain for Plasma Barrel, I think raising the average cost of the stick and adding more 2s, if you draw lots of 2 in a hand, you can maybe get away with it because of Teklo Core and Hardened Cross Trap, or potentially 2 blues plus 2 red cost attacks allows you to go pitch, load, load the Plasma Barrel shot, play the 2 attacks, come in for 15 damage, but it's not super exciting. And if you draw 3 of them, now you're starting to really get into a bit of trouble if you only have the 1 blue. So I think I would be careful about that. Saying that, if I was to add another 2-cost blue, maybe I'd go greedy and add an extra Overblast. I think having 2 max velocity, 2 Overblast as like your big sort of finishes in maybe a 2-3 turn format is maybe necessary. Maybe you do want to be that greedy to make sure you can regularly have that like 30 damage turn and have it on turn 2 or turn 3. So I wouldn't say that having the Overblast or choosing to play a second Overblast is incorrect, and I actually think it could be something that I might look at if I want to be. I feel like my other matchups in kind of that mid-range field are good. Maybe I just want more threats. It's also probably pretty good against control to have another threat there, especially if we're forced to maybe block with something on a Spinal Crush or something early. So wouldn't say no to that. But yeah, those are the changes I would potentially look at making. I think the list is pretty tight where it is, weirdly, just given it was kind of thrown together. But again, I haven't played events and events and events. The data points are pretty small, and it's mostly just off feel and theory where I sit right now. But those are the suggestions that I'd have. Now, I said at the top of the video that I would talk through some of the lines and some of the power that this deck can output. So I've just laid out, a particularly good line, in fact, but not an out of the question line. And then I'll look through some of the lines backwards where you could maybe replace some of these cards and just show the output. So as I said, turn one, a priority is always getting an arsenal card set up and a counter on the Pleasant Barrel Shot. And then we're kind of good to go. Let's have really powerful next 3 turns and let's push through this damage. Well, there's quite a bit of damage in front of you, which we'll look at. So this is definitely a very good 4-card hand. But what this would allow you to do, for instance, is to come in here. You can actually, quite nicely, you can start with both the Hardened Cross Trap and the Goliath Gauntlet. Play the Throttle, which we can come in for 8, boost away. Come in for 4, boost. Come in for 5. Pitch our blue card, boost. Leaves us with 2 resources left. And then actually what we want to do next is we can come in with a Plasma Barrel Shot. I'm going to come in here for, of course, 1 base plus our 3 cards are boosted. So come in for 4. And then we've got the maximum velocity on the end. Just by popping these Achilles Accelerator after we've come in with this Plasma Barrel Shot. Instant speed, so it's not going to break the chain. As long as we make sure we do it in sort of that chain link resolution or in the attack reaction step. And then we get to play this maximum velocity with our last 2 resources. Now, pretty big turn on the cards here. So 14 damage, 10, 14, 19, 23, 29. Looking at 31 damage there. So a very big output turn right off the bat. Of course, got about our Tickler Pounder, which comes in at the start there. So yeah, 10, 14, 19, 23. 33 damage in total. So that's a very, very big output turn. But they're not always going to be as good as this. So we can take it back and look at what some of these might look like without maybe quite that higher ceiling. But even if you take away a few cards, of course, we always want to make sure we have a counter on our Pleasant Barrel Shot. Maybe we've got a blue in there or something instead. It's not out of the question. Of course, we do have quite a few blues in the deck. So we've got a yellow 0 to 60, and maybe it's a blue zipper hit. So not quite as much damage. But of course, with that exact same line of play, we've still got our 3 boost cards. We're going to see 2 here, 4, 10, 13, 16, 20, and then 30. So we're seeing a lot of damage there. I was often having 27 damage turns. As soon as maximum velocity gets involved with these big turns, then we're really starting to see them come out. But even with something like an Overblast, of course, which does a similar job, or maybe it's not, maybe we don't have the maximum velocity or the Overblast, we've just got another 2-cost attack, something like an Overloop. Yeah, we lose an extra 5 damage. But of course, from this, 5, 8, 11, 17, 19, 21, 25 damage just here. So actually with the extra Overloop, because we'll boost it, that's going to be 26 damage. And we get to keep our Achilles Accelerator around. So you can see just the output this dash deck can do. And it's not out of the question to be doing these sort of turns. All right, well, that's about going to do it for me for this Dash Blitz deck tech video. A deck that I ran during Skirmish season. I wish I got to play another Skirmish with it. I had so much fun. This is honestly one of the most sort of enjoyable events I've played with a deck, especially in Blitz, in a very long time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Before I go, I just want to recap some of the key things about playing this deck, some sort of pointers and tips to keep in mind if you do want to pick up this Dash Plasma Barrel Shot deck and play it. So just going through, these are our sort of engine rooms. It's all about these equipment. How do we want to use the Achilles Accelerator? I just want to talk about that for a bit. So it is like those lines of play I just talked about in the previous sort of part of the video, looking to, come in with the Plasma Barrel Shot, then plus another big attack on top of it, or the big attack first, then the Plasma Barrel Shot. But of course, we just don't want to break the chain. That's kind of the focus. So you also want to think about how you're activating the Goliath Gauntlet and Hardened Cross Trap. Really keep that in mind. Do I need to do it at the start of the chain so that I don't break the chain for my Overblast or my Plasma Barrel Shot? Or can I come in with all this, come in with weapon, then break the chain and Hardened Cross Trap, Goliath Gauntlet into the maximum velocity? So basic rule of thumb, max velocity, probably okay to break these at the end of the chain. If not max velocity, and it's going to be something else, you probably want to be breaking at the start of the chain and leading with something like a throttle or overloop or combustible courier, whatever it's going to be, to make use of that. Achilles Accelerator, just to touch back, one of the sort of the key other points is Spark of Genius. That's the other time I'm going to use the Achilles Accelerator, and I'm not going to be afraid to use it. I'm going to use it really aggressively. If I have a Spark of Genius on my second turn or my first turn of action, so if I'm going first in the game, I'll often almost just always play get a counter on the Plasma Barrel Shot, and if I have the Spark of Genius, yeah, play it and go and get the tech low. But if it's on a turn where we're not drawing up afterwards, so not that turn 0, I'll be really aggressive with the Spark of Genius. I will come in with a card boost, and then I'll play the Spark of Genius immediately to go and get this tech low core, draw up our card to replace the Spark of Genius, crack the Achilles Accelerator to continue with my turn, and still have gas to come in. Plus, I'm like future-proof for the next 2 turns with this Teklo core, and I'll do that very aggressively with Spark of Genius. Teklo Pounder, yeah, we're always going to start with this item, and you want to make the most of it for those first 2 turns, really get what you can out of it. Arsenal targets. So these 4 cards are really great Arsenal targets, I think. To be honest, any of the 2-cost ones are fine, but you do need to understand, like, what are you going to do with it? If you're under pressure and you don't have a hardened cross trap left, and sometimes it's not as good to be arsenaling these 2-cost cards, think about max velocity. If you're under pressure and you can't keep a 5-card hand, do not be putting maximum velocity anywhere near your arsenal. Try and defend with that card, pitch it, whatever you need to do. Do not put that into your arsenal because it's going to cost you. You're not going to be able to get it out. So that is one thing that you do need to think about. But it is very easy in this deck to get it off. And as I say, those first 3 turns are crucial. So, maybe you're defending a lot on turn 1 because you've set up a maximum velocity in arsenal there. Keeping that life restrained so that you can take the next big hit from your opponent and have that big 30 damage turn, for instance. The 0 costs and the 1 costs are really important as well. These are also great arsenal targets, and these are sort of cards that are going to enable you to have those big turns, plus also push damage. One thing is quite nice, if you're really under pressure, back against the wall late in the game, maybe it's turn 3, late in the game, it's turn 3, you're able to have this 0 to 60, or it's the last card in your hand, you defend with 3 cards, you're still coming in for 6 with the Teklo Pounder as long as you boost it. So these 0 and 1 cost cards, even like the blue 0 costs are fine to arsenal if you're looking to know in the next couple of turns you're trying to set up a big overblast or Pleasant Barrel plus max velocity turn or whatever it might be. So I just want to cover those before we went off, just give you a few sort of rules of thumb to finish off with this deck. And yeah, go out, have fun playing it. The deck list is down in the description if you would like to play it. Remember to drop us a like if you enjoyed this deck tech and you want to see more from us in the future. Myself and Brendan will also be doing some deck techs. Then yeah, drop a like, make sure you subscribe. We're almost at 4,000 subscribers, and this is the 1-year anniversary of Arsenal Pass. So a big thank you to all of our podcast listeners, to the viewers of the channel, and those who have supported us. Not just since day 1, but as our journey has gone along in the past 12 months. Just again, a big, massive thank you, and have fun. Enjoy playing this deck. I think it's just outrageously fun to play, and there's some really cool lines of play that you can do, and you will find them as you play them. Other than the ones I've just pointed out, there's so many more as well. So see you in the next video.